Hello and welcome to Startup Street. I'm Shruti Mishra. The GST Council last evening decided to impose 28% tax on online games, casinos and horse racing, which, however, would be on the initial amount paid and not the whole value of each bet placed. A few states dissented to certain provisions in the law, but the Council went ahead with the decision without a vote as majority of the states were in agreement, thereby confirming a CNBC-TV18 news break. The 51st GST Council meeting, chaired by Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, decided that it will make all efforts to amend the current law and bring the implementation on into effect by October 1st. It would also monitor the progress of the rule and possibly review the 28% rate if necessary after 6 months of implementation. Listen in.
The Council agreed today to come back after 6 months to review the way in which this is getting implemented. When I say 6 months, it's not 6 consecutive months beginning from today. It begins from after when this gets implemented. We are all hopeful that it gets implemented from 1st October. If it is 1st October when it gets implemented, 6 months from then, the Council can review the position. It was decided, and I'm just putting it briefly, that all of them, or each one of them, will be taxed at 28% on face value. The decision was not unanimous. So, yes, whilst the Council's legacy has been on a positive, consensus-based decision-making, there are times, once earlier and now, where the decision is not consensus-based. Delhi wanting online to go back to the group of ministers, 18% GGR, which actually net results in 8 to 9% revenue only. Today's 18% GGR on GGR becomes 28% on GGR. Even then, we will be collecting only around 11 to 12%. So simpler alternative is 28% on the face value.
No, there was no voting because there were very handful of states, 2 in the case of casino and 1 in the case of online gaming who had reservations. It was also clarified that this is actually an enabling provision that we are introducing in the Act. This amendment is more of a clarification because betting has always been included. Betting, gambling and lottery, these are already included as actionable claims, and our belief is that even online gaming or the betting going on in online gaming, casinos and horse racing, these are also in the nature of betting only. And so they are taxable, and they are taxable at 28%.
All right, that was the Finance Minister and the Revenue Secretary on levying the 28% GST. And to elaborate on the impact of the 28% GST, joining us now are Joy Bhattacharya, the Director General, Federation of Indian Fantasy Sports. We have Saurabh Agarwal, Tax Partner at EY, Deepak Gullapalli, Founder and CEO at A23, and Abhishek Rastogi, Founding Partner, Rastogi Chambers. Welcome, gentlemen. And Deepak, let me first come to you. Your first reaction to the verdict and what happened now? What kind of an impact do you see on the online gaming business in India? Do you have a number?
No, thank you. I think, firstly, it's been a long pending issue. We've been waiting for last 3 years.
Yes.
And this kind of puts an end to the uncertainty in terms of how the government is looking at taxing our industry. I'd like to say it does hurt the industry. It will impact our revenues. There's an increase of about 400% of GST that we will have to pay to the government. We collect it from the consumer and pay as a supplier of service. Yes, there will be a big impact to revenues, profitability of the industry. But however, it brings an end to the uncertainty on how the industry is going to be taxed. We will have to revisit our revenue models, our unit economics from here on, and to operate under the new tax regime in the country. And we are happy that on one side we are happy that there's an end to this uncertainty, but we'll have to work around different business models and revenue models to continue to provide the service.
And Deepak, I will speak to you about the new models that you will rework on a little later in the interview. But first, let me now go to Joy. Joy, your reaction to the outcome of the 51st GST Council meeting. While, like Deepak said, the new tax framework clarifies and resolves uncertainty, but it will lead to a 350% increase in GST. Do you believe this will set the Indian online gaming industry back several years?
Look, we definitely think that it'll take a year or two for the industry to recover. But I concur with Deepak in one thing, that in the long run, having things resolved for us, knowing exactly what the government stand is, knowing what the taxation is really important for us. In the last 6 months, we've figured out the government has given us a Digital India Act, which it's working towards. It's given us a nodal ministry. I think these are not going to be easy times at all, because we're living in a situation where there has got to be a lot of adjustment in innovation to make sure that, we come out of this. But again, I concur with Deepak. In the end, one of the things that we've seen is that the government listened to us. It went back, had another meeting on August the 2nd, and came back with something on deposits. There was a uncertainty between face value and deposits. They listened to us, came back, and now they're telling us that once it's implemented after 6 months, they're going to see where this decision takes them, whether it's going to be that hurtful for the industry or not. And therefore, there is one confidence that we have. The government is listening to us at this point in time. They are saying that we want to tax you, but we are aware that we want you to develop as an industry as well. So I think that for our industry is a good sign. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of work, and people like Deepak are at the forefront of it. But I think in the long run, knowing that the government is concerned about us, knowing that the government knows where we are, knowing that the government is taxing us, and knowing that the government is listening to us when we've gone to them and said, for example, that face value will be almost impossible for the industry to overcome. I have confidence that this is a step forward. We are moving forward now. We'll move a couple of steps backward in the next year or two while we adjust. But eventually, we'll definitely be moving forward.
All right. So the good news is that the government is listening, while revenue and profitability numbers will take a hit for a year or two. Saurabh, let me now come to you. Your views on the 28% levy of GST on the full face value of bets. What does this mean for the sector?
See, Shruti, the certainty which has been provided by the 51st GST Council would likely help the companies having higher GGRs compared to those with, low GGRs. Some companies may still explore the option to approach the higher judicial forums by challenging the levy on deposits made in wallet on the ground that it is not a supply being rendered by them to the consumer, but it's only the GGR or the platform fee which should be subjected to tax. Saying so, Shruti, it's important to understand that there is an alignment broadly between the center and majority of the state governments. Therefore, industry should take this in good spirits and start looking at implementing the changes in the business model and ERP to ensure readiness by October. Saying so, there will likely be few challenges like less return on the buck for the user, and the time will tell how it will impact the business. Further, investors will closely watch this development to evaluate the attractiveness of the online gaming landscape. Shruti, it's important. Government is very open, as one of my friends have said. Government is open, and they are open to seek industry views after looking into the impact which the changes will have in next 6 months.
All right. Let me now quickly go across to Abhishek. Abhishek, apart from the central GST law amendments, states will also have to amend their GST laws for the new tax to kick in. Now, the finance minister who chaired the council meeting hopes it can be implemented from October 1st. First, your views on this, and also Goa and Sikkim, who wanted the 28% levy on casino bets to apply on gross gaming revenue and not the entire face value, kept appealing that they were small states and needed consideration. Your views on that also?
See, I think federalism is an important part of the Indian Constitution. GST has got federalism at its peak. Now, let's understand, online gaming, betting, lottery, casinos, horse racing, some of these aspects are subject matters of state. Now, if center empowers those state subjects, of course, there can be constitutional challenge with respect to federalism, because remember, some of these subjects are state subject. So, for instance, casinos can operate in a particular state, only if that particular state wants it to operate there. So I think over-empowering or encroaching on the state subject will have to be tested at some point of time. As my friend Saurabh mentioned, there will of course be a challenge with respect to valuation, because today you may say that as per the provisions or the amendments or the proposed amendments, you would intend to tax a particular value of actionable claim in a particular way. If this goes into a wallet, or if it comes into a wallet in some way, in some form or the other. The relevant question which remains is whether this amount which comes to taxation purview is the revenue of the online gaming company or the casino players. If that is not the case, then there is certainly the valuation issue, because it goes beyond the statutory boundaries of GST.
Okay.
And hence the constitutional test is pertinent. We know that this is a policy decision, and I think industry today is in a different mode altogether, because the government is with the industry. They want to have a pragmatic approach. But can policy decision be subject matter of judicial review? We will have to test that after seeing the details.
Absolutely. My next question is for Deepak and Joy. Deepak, the council will review this after 6 months. Where do you stand as an industry today, and what do you expect to change in the next 6 months? Deepak, if you could go first.
I think it all depends on how Indian consumers react to this big change, because there is going to be tax burden on the consumer. In the earlier tax regime, because the GST was going from the GGR or the company's revenue, this was not really visible to the player or the consumer. But with this new rule, we'll still have to wait for the actual draft and how do we implement, etc. But consumers will see the impact of 28% GST on deposit or full face value. And it all depends on how they react to the industry, if they will continue to play on legal Indian websites, or would they move to offshore websites, which are also covered in the GST. But we are still not clear on how will they enforce that part.
Okay.
But I think within 6 months, the government will have data, the government will have numbers on how industry is growing or is functioning, both from a consumer standpoint and from the company standpoint. Let's see. Let's hope for something better after 6 months.
Let's hope for something better. Joy, you agree with Deepak? What do you expect to change in the next 6 months?
Look, if it happens in the timeline that we are talking about implementation starting around early October.
Yes.
That really means that the World Cup, you're going to see two major events for fantasy sports happening in that period. That's the World Cup, and after that you will have the IPL. In that 6 month period, you'll be covering those two. And I think those will be really litmus tests for everybody to give an idea of the impact that it's having. And I'm, to be honest with you, I'm glad that the government is saying we're going to look at it 6 months. So it's 6 months still gives you a time. It's a fairly short time frame in which they can react after that and make sure that corrective measures are taken if they see that, this is not working out. So I think the good thing is that we know that, okay, the government is saying, let's do it for 6 months. Two events will be held then, which are fairly large events, which will give everyone a sense of where it's going. As far as fantasy sport is concerned, I think it gives us a very clear indication of how we're going to move forward in this.
All
and I think the most important thing I just repeatedly like to stress is, as long as the government is listening and as long as the government has clearly shown its intent that it wants to build us as an industry, if the tax seems to be excessive, they will take corrective measures. So that faith, after working with the government and representing to them about how CA would be so difficult for us, I think that faith we now have, that they've given us that reassurance that we are going to work with you as an industry. Let's see for 6 months how this is. In its wisdom, over 3 years, the GST Council has come to a decision after 3 years to say this is what we think it is.
Okay.
But they have said that in 6 months, if that does not work, we'll have another look at it.
All right. So
and I think once we've got that confidence from them that they are reacting to us as an industry and saying, we'll help you. We're not here to kill you. Yes, we believe this is correct. But if it's not, we'll review it after 6 months.
Sure. All right.
So I think that is the confidence.
Yes, 6 months, which will hopefully start from October 1st, like you said, will be a litmus test to big sporting events coming up. And on that note, it's time for us to take a short break, but we will continue the discussion on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Startup Street as we discuss the impact of 28% GST on online gaming. Joy, let me come back to you. And, the gaming industry has had a tough 1 month. In fact, CNBC-TV18 had reported that members of the industry had met the Revenue Secretary on 14th of July. You spoke about this a little bit earlier in the interview, but tell us what transpired and what kind of engagement have you had with the government? And most importantly, what kind of talks have you had with the industry since the last meeting?
Two things. One is that in fact, all the gaming federations, 3 prominent gaming federations got together and represented to the government. And we told them of our concerns, and we told them also that, this is 350% is a big blow, but CEA, as we know, face value will just wipe out the industry. And I think that is the point that I'm trying to make, that, the government was listening. They heard us out. They kindly gave us time. They heard us out. The Revenue Secretary heard us out. We were heard out by the government. They understood our concerns. That's one. 2 is what we have tried to do is throughout this process, from the very day, the first time the notification came out, we have reached out to our members. We've held meetings with them. We've had online Zoom seminars with them, giving them an understanding. Because for some of the smaller players, it's also an understanding of exactly how it impacts them. And I think it's our job as industry body to try and get that across to our people. So we've continuously been reacting with our members. Yes, there is a certain amount of, obviously, the first shock was there. I think what is now understanding is that, okay, we have certainty, we are going to move forward. And, people are saying that larger companies will have this better, save this better, smaller companies will survive. One of the feedbacks we're getting is that the larger companies might have more, resources to look after it, but the smaller companies are more agile in the way they can innovate in this situation and move forward. So both of them, as I said, finally, it's going to be how we innovate. It's not going to be easy.
Absolutely.
But it is still better to be in a certain, sure regulatory environment where we know what's happening rather than have uncertainty. And we have an assurance that if this is not working, in 6 months, the government is going to look at it again and say, what is it that we can do right or wrong?
Interesting points made there. Yes. Let me now go across to Abhishek. And Abhishek, I want to quote you here. You've said that it appears that most of the issues would be addressed only through the constitutional route, as there may not be much left now in terms of the support from the council. If you could elaborate on this, and what do you think will happen next?
See, I think a couple of points here. One is we know that SLP has now been filed by the revenue in the case of Gamescraft in Supreme Court.
Yes.
And hence the moot point which remains is whether the government wants to come with a prospective amendment or proposals, or will it go even to the past. Believe me or not, the tariff entry as it reads today, it says actionable claim in the form of chance to win. And only chance to win is taxed at 28%. And hence, any tax which comes at a higher rate to those activities where there is a game of skill will again be under dispute. Now, as far as the council is concerned, council has taken the decision, but that decision will have to be tested on 2 folds. One, on the principles of federalism, whether central can get into those subject items which are of state, that is one. Secondly, whether Article 19(1)(g) of the Indian Constitution will come into play for those players where the business will become unviable because of valuation issues. Last point is that casinos cannot be better off than the online gaming. The tax on both have to be at par. So for some reason, if the valuation is tilted in favor of the casinos, Article 14 of the Indian Constitution will come into play. Arbitrariness, vagueness will come into play.
All right. Valid points made there. Saurabh, let me quickly come to you. What happens to the retrospective applicability of the tax law? Do you have clarity on that front?
See, I think we'll have to wait for the fine prints to come in this regard. The devil lies in the detail. That's what I'll say. Of course, this government, there has been a clarity since past that they will not go in for a retrospective amendment. So I think, as my friend Abhishek has said, we'll have to look out in details as to whether they are looking at a retrospective amendment. That doesn't appear to be the intent, at least so far, given the representations which have been made by the industrial bodies. So that doesn't appear to be the clear intent of the government, but of course we'll have to be watchful to see what exactly is coming in the fine prints.
All right, so we'll have to go through the fine prints there. Deepak, you mentioned this in the interview, at the beginning of the interview, and I want to understand more on what is the plan of action when it comes to innovating and rebuilding your business model. The fact is 28% GST is here to stay. So how are you looking at reinventing your models?
No, I see there are different games in today operating in the country, right? There's fantasy sports, there's online rummy, there's online poker, there's casual gaming, and there are different formats that you can operate. Whether it is a 2-player game to a 6-player game to a 100-player game to a 1,000-player tournament model, we'll have to do a lot of A/B testings. We'll have to figure out and innovate newer formats that will help us take this 28% tax burden. But we are confident that there are models out there and a little bit tweak into how much we spend on acquiring new customers, how much as businesses we spend on retaining old customers. So the unit economics will have to be little modified to build a stronger business model. And I also want to add that, especially there's a lot of talk around small companies and big companies. But end of it, I think this end of this uncertainty that is not there anymore will also attract a lot of investments into the industry.
Sure.
Last 2 years has been a kind of a dull moment for the industry. That will also ensure that there's more innovation possible.
Yes.
There's more startups opportunities with new investors coming on board.
Okay. You spoke of new investors coming on board, and one final question, which is for all of you, and if you could answer that quickly. Do you see gaming companies taking their businesses outside of India? Joy, why don't you go first?
Look, a lot of people have been talking about it. I don't think this is going to happen in the first 6 months. The first 6 months, they're going to have a look, genuinely see if this can work out here, because at least there's certainty out here. We know what we're doing out here. And obviously, the government is today telling you that even if you go abroad, you're going to get taxed. So I think the first thing they'll do is say, can we make this model work in India? And I'm confident a lot of them will be able to do it.
Okay. Joy is confident. Deepak, what about you?
I am super confident. I think with this government, if we work with the government in the right approach, I don't think none of us would go outside India, because we want to pay the right amount of taxes. We want to create an industry. We've done that for the last 15 years, and I think there's a big future for the industry over the next,
All
in
right.
this country.
Okay, so you see a lot of potential there. Saurabh, you agree with Joy and Deepak?
Yeah, I clearly agree with both Joy and Deepak. There's no requirement for any company to move out of India. I think government is having a very pragmatic view. They are having discussions with the industry players, and they have kept the window open. They are saying that they'll look into 6 months, and in case there are changes required, they are open to those changes. So I don't foresee. I am completely in agreement with both Joy and Deepak.
All right. Abhishek, final words. You agree the government is listening and there's no need to look outside of India?
No, I think certainly the government is listening, and there are pragmatic and robust policies which we look ahead. But I think in the long run, if the industry has to sustain here, it will not only be the GST or the indirect taxes, it will have to be the complete brunt of taxes, both in the form of GST and direct taxes. Now, if there is a huge gap in terms of the direct tax implications within India and outside of India, I would prefer to get the tax of GST at equal rate, which everybody else would get, but get the benefit of direct taxes. So I think to plug that loophole, the government must come with some pragmatic solutions. And indeed, we feel that the government will come out.
All right. So the consensus is that the government is listening. We're waiting for a more pragmatic approach. Thank you, gentlemen, for those wonderful insights. And like you said, we'll be waiting for the review to happen after 6 months, starting October, if this gets implemented from 1st of October. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking to all of you.
Thanks a lot.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Startup Street. More news and updates coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.